Hello, my friends of Cosmic Agency, this is Gosha. Well, what did you think of that epic, as I think, video that demonstrated the lives of Yazhi and Swaruu? From what I see from comments, I think you liked it very much. Like I said, I wasn't sure when to publish this, if to publish this. As you see, this is a very complex, complicated, metaphysically and otherwise story, and it was not easy to explain. It was not easy to understand. I was actually even collecting some of the pieces of the story recently. And some of you asked me, "Oh, how did you feel last year when you knew she died?" And it had to be hard for you. But the thing is, it wasn't really that much. It was, but it wasn't, because like it was explained in the video, Yazhi and Swaruu merged quite a lot, if not entirely, during the time they were together. And sometimes we even had the opportunity to talk to them both at the same time. And when you spoke to Yazhi, you knew that she knew exactly what you talked about before with Swaruu, and vice versa. So you already understood that merging concept. And also, it already happened before, some time ago, that Swaruu 9 was in the pod, and we only talked to Yazhi. She was in a medical pod. And in that time, Yazhi was adapting herself to Swaruu's 9 personality, as according to her, to make it easier for us. So she's relatable. And you remember I used to say, well, don't do that, just be yourself, it's okay. But already in that time, I already knew that whatever Swaruu 9 was also in Yazhi, and more. So that's why when this happened last March, it wasn't really such a tragic event. It was a bit sad, of course, but I did understand that she keeps living through Yazhi. And actually, we were not even told that it was like death, really, and because they didn't understand it themselves, like it was explained in the video, they were processing this. So we were like slowly given this information about what really happened. So anyway, I'm glad you liked that video. This is going to be now part 2, where Aneeka first will explain how she sees differences between them, and then Yazhi will explain some major worldview and concept differences between them. Because now that we said they see some things differently, you probably must be wondering, what is it? What concepts are outdated and which concepts are expanded on? So she's going to explain that, and then in the end, with my own words, I'm just going to add some more thoughts about how I perceive the differences between them. How do you see differences in their worldview, Swaruu 9 and Yazhi?
Well, besides the obvious, Swaruu 9 was an adult woman, and Swaruu 12 is a child with an expanded mind, star child. Swaruu of Era, Swaruu 9, was always in a constant fight against evil, also striving with all her might to be spiritual and etherical. And Yazhi Swaruu Tasherit 12, Swaruu 12, looks like she transmutes and assimilates evil, and is very spiritual and etherical, with no effort at all, even making more than one person here feel like she was not really here among us, more like a fairy or in a partition. Swaruu 12's presence is very strong, like what I describe as a gravity well. Everything converges on her, and everything seems to have something to do with her. Swaruu 9 took rejection in general very personally, always wanting to be loved, being very much a people-pleaser person. She took at heart all kinds of online troll attacks and bad criticism. All this added up to her stress, causing high blood pressure that physically explains the series of bad strokes she had in her internal organs that ultimately led to her death. Swaruu 12 Yazhi, on the other hand, does not care about this at all. She just says whatever she needs to say, and clearly does not care a bit what others think or say. So she is immune to all things trolls. Whenever she is tired, she sleeps, and sometimes may not go online for days, just to come back for several hours at her whim. About the differences in their worldview, this is a long topic, but I think the most important difference in worldview is that Swaruu 9 was a fighter, always wanting to confront evil and wrongdoers directly with a sword, armor, and a shining horse at a full gallop, like a cavalry. Swaruu 12 says and behaves as if though mind power were always the answer and the means to resolve all conflict, no matter how bad it is. Swaruu's 9 weapons were a sword and a fighter starship. Swaruu 12's weapons are her brain and her cuteness.
Well, Swaruu 9 wasn't all for the direct combat though. She also stated she was fighting affecting the human consciousness. It was important for her. She did spend 2 years with us giving topics on consciousness. She wasn't in combat anymore. So she was changing already, I think.
Yes, I think she was in the process, but I also think she had an internal fight going on there. Very much as in, be nice to your neighbors, but carry a big stick behind your back attitude. She also said that when the time is right and you have no other choice, then you must fight with weapons. While Yazhi moves with an aura of invulnerability, needing no big stick, she also tends to cross solid walls and appears older at will. The how exactly she does this is difficult to precise or to understand, but she insists that it all comes from one ability and one only: to be able to control and fragment her perception of time at will, using nothing but the mind. Swaruu 9 was very like physical, always an effort to be more etherical, even with her extreme diets that neglected the body. This little one is not doing any effort to be spiritual or to be anything. She just is, and at the same time, she looks like she has achieved and even surpassed what Swaruu wanted or was seeking. She doesn't behave or look physical sometimes. Some people here, like Alahi or Eridania, has stated that it feels as if Yazhi was a little fairy. But I must stress that Swaruu 9 and Swaruu 12 are definitely not the same person. And all those theories, like the one of the Federation holding Swaruu a prisoner or a hostage, are unfounded. And good luck even trying to catch or contain Yazhi. They can't. That's why she likes the Roadrunner so much. She sees herself in that bird, fast, agile, untouchable, with a complete invulnerability aura around the little girl. I think that if there is one word that defines Yazhi's personality, is invulnerability.
Swaruu 9 was nothing other than an 8th loop of Svarupapriyananda, Swaruu 2, with the exact same background and childhood, just living 8 different repeated life cycles, different only as the result of consciously taking different decisions. About my age, there is a problem here, and it is the constant time slip we are all in, especially when you space travel and time jump. This is also reflected in the fact that people calculate that when I, Yazhi, arrived, I was 9 years old, and in 2020 I had to be 10 years old, and in 2021, logically, I would be 11 years old. But the fact is that I am still 9 years old in my body development. This is because I am following my own linear timeline and not being affected by an external collective one. Not like I am not growing. I am not growing as fast as people would expect me to grow. People on Earth and Taygetans here as well. I grow at my own pace, and I set it. And I didn't even notice I was setting a different growth pace. I calculate I'm doing like 5 to 6 years per 1 year of Earth. As I have explained before, time is relative to who experiences it, and only is perceived somewhat similar if 2 or more people have a perceptual agreement. And those perceptual temporal agreements on how long things take, linear time on Earth, are indoctrinated into the minds of children at a very young age. And humans use time-keeping machines, clocks and watches, as a metronome is to music, to keep the entire orchestra moving in unison. Before you go into your differences, why did you choose the name Yazhi? Where did it come from? Yazhi means little, as written in Navajo language, as it is very similar to Taygetan, only linear and possible to write with human letters. I remember it started with Chiki Swaruu. Yes, Chiki Swaruu, the little one, hence Yazhi. But my name, Yazhi, evolved once I was already here with you. The most obvious differences: Swaruu 9, body 19 years old, 150 centimeters tall, 42 kilo, adult, fully formed female. Swaruu 12, body 9 years old, 139 centimeters tall, child body female. Habits: food. Swaruu 9, minimalist eater, full vegan. Swaruu 12, omnivorous carnivore, artificially grown tissue, eats until her belly shines. And I go fast for long periods of time as well, but then I eat well. About the artificially grown tissue, I do not recommend terrestrial artificial meat. Also, I do recognize that brains work better on ketones, that is, burning fat during a fast, not working as well on glucose. So for many people, fasting does facilitate or promote spiritual experiences and channeling. Sleeping habits: Swaruu 9, short 4 to 6 hour sleep cycles, then as many as 40 plus hours awake, full sleep with REM. Swaruu 12, multiple short
2 to 4 hour sleep cycles, plus long 8 hours plus sleeping times, not defined by time of the day or night. Lucid conscious dreaming all the time she is asleep, and full astral travel at will during sleeping time and also fully awake. Meditation. Swaruu 9. Meditation times once or twice a day, traditional. Swaruu 12. Meditation at will. Consciousness mostly in meditation, if not always, at deep trance at will, and without losing awareness. Most issues, as in past trauma, resolved in Swaruu 12. Okay, let's talk about the differences in your worldviews, as how you see certain concepts expands on how Swaruu 9 saw them. I don't know if I remember everything about what Swaruu 9 said about densities, but as far as I remember, she used to say that the Earth is contained in a 3D bubble, and that everything outside the Van Allen belt is 5D, being that 5D is the primordial or base density average for the universe. And she stated that it could be measured in hertz and as a vibration of matter, being that 4D is like an astral to 3D, meaning a copy of the world, streets and all, but in the so-called spirit world. And that 6D could be as a reference the 5D astral equivalent, as 4D is for 3D. That's Swaruu 9. Yazhi, I state that a density is a state of mind, a personal perception, and a density is only a reflection or a personal concept or capacity or range of understanding of one or another particular person or point of attention. I state that there are no densities as such, or that there are as many as there are points of attention, being that the range of understanding of that particular point of attention is also what defines a soul, and it is directly tied to its thought forms and its range of memory understanding. I state that the concept of densities as in numbers and all what defines them are human concepts and are the reflection of a heavily fragmented brain that is programmed to try to understand an illusory outside world, breaking it up in smaller, more manageable parts. And stating that a density is the equivalent to the perception capacity discernment of a soul or point of attention of source. I also explain that when two or more people share the same density, it is only another illusion based on perception agreements and will never ever be the same density for them all, only coinciding mostly on the major points they themselves have placed there, all having a personal variation of what they call density. Also, understanding that in this case, a density equals a reality, a world. Swaruu 9 stated that densities were one thing and they are not to be confused with dimensions. Yazhi states that densities are based on perception and understanding of the observer. Therefore, I say that a density is directly linked to the perception and understanding of dimensions as well. The higher a density, the more dimensions can be perceived and understood. However, you would still state that astral entities, etc., stay in something called 4D, or where, if there are no Ds. I only mention them, or like that, to have a common ground for an example. Basically, everything that exists is there. You can't see it perhaps, but it's there. And that is due to your mental evolution. Not because you are not somewhere, as in effect, there is no time and there is no space. So everything is now and everything is here. Principle of non-locality, found in higher dimensional understanding. Okay. Quick question, Yazhi. What did the machines on the moon 12,500 years back were to do then? If it was not to lower the density to 3D, what was their purpose? They produced an etheric field, like a force field around Earth. And that limits all interaction with the outside. This alone would limit the perceptual capacity of all the inhabitants of Earth, therefore lowering their perceptions and density of living with them as well. Ergo, 3D. Limiting the perceptual capacity of the inhabitants of Earth due to extreme isolation. This is also why the Prime Directive is so heavily enforced on Earth, because they don't get outside information, leaving the controllers of Earth total control over what reality means and its limits. This also imposing a new paradigm and reality model onto the population of Earth, what we call the Matrix, as in a false limited reality completely controlled artificially, and this automatically leads to the self-limiting of DNA in the inhabitants, therefore suppressing higher cerebral functions like telepathy. This means that the Matrix is not controlled by a frequency or by generators, those only limited outside information, accentuating the validity of what the controllers imposed on the human population as reality, possible and not possible, real and false. So, as I stated before, all the reality there on Earth is based on one thing alone: propaganda for mind control. And that is how you create a density, a new artificially controlled reality. Everything there is based on the mind control. Understood. Now, briefly state differences between Swaruu's not being able to change collective timeline by jumping versus your belief that yes, you can. Copy. Swaruu stated that whenever you time jumped in your ship to change an unwanted event, going back to prevent it from happening again, what really happened was an illusion, because the sand clock pilot that traveled back in time and managed to change the said event only opens a new timeline of her own, where such an event to be prevented no longer took place, but in her place of origin, she would have changed nothing. because what caused her to travel back in time was the negative event in itself. Therefore, it will never stop to exist. All you do as a sand clock pilot is change your perception of the line of events, altering only your timeline and not the one of others. So, it is never possible to change those past events, only to jump personally to another timeline you created as soon as you went back in time and relived that past event with full understanding and memory of what would happen next. As soon as there is an observer, the timeline is switched and changed. So you can never achieve tactical or strategic time alteration. So it ends up being only an illusion for the time jumper, her or himself. Therefore, rendering the whole concept of tactical and strategic time jumping completely useless. Now, my belief. As stated above about densities, being that there is one density per point of attention, consciousness, soul, person, it also means that there is one timeline for each person or soul. And again, timelines that are perceived as same are only similar due to the agreements between two or more people or souls. But a soul is not an isolated object in itself. It is more like the result of multiple points of attention blending into one, creating a soul. This meaning many souls with a so-called lower understanding, therefore density, are forming a larger one. Source is total oneness, the absolute, the all included. And the illusion of a soul is that it is limited, as in not source, separated. But as I understand this, a soul could also be defined by the range from where to where source oneness remembers what is perceived as separate events. So, a group of souls with a lower range of understanding sum up in a collective unconscious or set of collective agreements about perception and reality will combine to form a larger soul with more understanding. As if they were cells in a body, and that is exactly as cells in a body work, being them the primordial elements of consciousness and biology that form a human body and other bodies as well. So, a group of souls create through agreements a larger, more complex one that in turn will form another set of agreements with other perceived souls at the same level to form an even more complex and advanced soul. This is empirically experienced by beings of what many would call of a higher density, for lack of better terms, to make myself understood, where the being realizes that it is indeed the sum of the consciousnesses of its friends below it holds dear to it, because love is a drive for integration. So, from the point of existing of a being in a higher density, it is the result of the sum of the people in contact and in the same collective unconscious as it perceives. The being is all the other beings forming it, like or as if it had assimilated them all. And from that point of understanding, everything this being experiences, including time jumping and alteration, will affect the people's souls' points of attention included in the collective unconscious that formed it in the first place. And all time looping and temporal manipulation does not only affect one being, it affects a collective of beings. And with this, you can alter from that point of view a collective timeline, and not only the one of the time jumper. But we can also understand changing a collective timeline as the perceptual manipulation of the people forming a collective unconscious. So whatever you do that affects a collective perception will alter their collective timeline. And this is what the Cabal is doing, for example, when it alters, as it always has, the collective of people, souls living on Earth, changing collectively the rules and the terms of what is or is not possible, therefore affecting a collective timeline depending on what information they are being fed with. So then again, you can change a collective timeline using mind control alone, because everything is spawned from the mind anyway. You make many minds think the same, you change a collective timeline. Sorry, I never explained this before in writing, first time ever, so it may be possible to improve, don't know. Why didn't Swaruu 9 realize this? She did not. She saw altering collective consciousness as mind control, but separated it from time jumping. I see it as one and the same, because change the collective perception enough and you also time jump, as time is nothing but perception based on agreements and on information.
Swaruu was not always, but she was rather a nostalgic person. She carried a lot of sadness and melancholia and seriousness. I remember Aneeka used to tell us that she never really smiled a lot. She was always alone. She liked to be alone, and she was very calm. And Yazhi, on the other hand, being a different person, new, fresh personality, she's full of life. She's joyful. She can be loud. She can be cheerful. She can jump up and down on the bed and throw pillows at you, and she's just a joy to have around. As Aneeka tells us, it's not that Swaruu wasn't a joy to have around. She was just much more serious. It was obvious she was carrying a lot of burden on her shoulders, and Yazhi seems to be more liberated from those karmas and those stresses of the past. So she's playful, she's joyful, she says as she thinks, she's out there, she's extroverted, she's much more social, she's always everywhere around, always talking to someone, always having something to do, very, very playful, even mischievous, as Aneeka says. You know, she likes to play practical jokes on the crew members, and as she has those powers, psychic powers and mental powers that other crew members don't have, she likes to play jokes on them, as she says, to expand their mind, to make them question things, to make them see that there's still more to learn beyond what they know themselves already about the reality, and they do know a lot, but yes, he's teaching them there is still much more to learn, so be open, don't freak out, and just learn. But she can be still mischievous, as Aneeka said. She can be with you at the dining, at the place where they eat, and she can steal your food food, through the table, but from the bottom of the table, that's crossing through the solid matter. So it does freak them out a little bit. A funny story is that when Yazhi started to display those powers, it was stressing them a bit. And I remember Aneeka was sharing that it was a bit stressful because they were not used to it. They were not used to someone coming over and still displaying that kind of mental superiority. In a way, they are used to being, let's say the gods here, but of course they are not, they are people, but they still, they, throughout the centuries, they have been the ones displaying those superiorities, let's call it that way, technologically or whatever. And now, Yazhi comes, this little child, and is teaching them that, hey, there's still much more to learn. Don't put a limit on what you think reality is. There is much more to expand to. So that's Yazhi for you. Swaruu was much softer than Yazhi, I would say, in some aspects. Also in the way she expressed herself, and in the way she used to share the subjects with us and then with the public. She was much more sensitive to how she was accepted and how she was received. She cared about that reception much more than Yazhi. So that's why many times she was a bit diplomatic and she was a bit careful with how she was expressing things. And Yazhi simply does not care. She is fully herself. She feels totally carefree and how I would say, totally just not concerned about the opinion of other people and about what she's going to say. Swaruu was still caring about how she was going to be received, and acceptance was important for her. And Yazhi simply is not concerned. She is direct. She says things as they are, and she's not concerned with how it's going to be received by the people, if she's going to be liked or not. She doesn't mind not to be liked as long as she feels loyal to what she believes the truth is. So that's why she might come across, when you watch her videos comparing to Swaruu, as stronger, more direct, more, she has that punch and she says things as they are, the truth, for what they are. And Swaruu, of course, she was telling the truth as well, but she was much more softer in her delivery. So another great difference between Swaruu and Yazhi is that you can't really measure Yazhi in the same way as you would categorize Swaruu, because Swaruu was still a Taygetan, slowly going away into a different direction, into a new species. And that could be another video in itself, because how the new species are formed is through the expansion of consciousness. So Yazhi is already a new species that doesn't really reflect what Taygetans are. She's been studied and monitored by Allahi, by Senetre all the time, and they conduct all these different studies on her. So the same measures cannot be applied to her. The same criteria cannot be applied to her as probably they were applied to Swaruu. She just cannot be fit in any specific place or category. And that's because, remember, there are 3 generations that separate Swaruu, Swaruu 9, and Yazhi, who is Swaruu 12. 3 generations. So there's a lot of mind expansion, a lot of journey for the soul in those 3 generations. So that's why she brings such different, more expanded perspectives, because it's a result of her soul's ongoing discoveries. Yazhi is simply, like Aneeka said, invincible, even though she can hurt herself here and there playing as well. But she's wild, she's untamed, and that's just Yazhi. Some of you picked up on Dale calling her LLS, little sister. Yes, this is the nickname that he has for her, but that started with Swaruu. because Swaruu he used to call little sister. He calls Aneeka his sister Aneeka as well, brother Dor Galel. So that's how he talks to them, and Swaruu was little sister. So then when Yazhi came, he called her little sister. I think that's cute. I think that's very cute. And something that characterizes Yazhi very much is that everything that happens around her, she lives. She lives it. Any memory that she has, and she has many, she lives it. And I'm not saying this metaphorically, as just remembering the emotions or whatever. No, she literally lives it. She literally lives it, and everything flows through her. All the emotions that happen on the ship from anybody flow through her. So she is much more vulnerable to energies. And like I said, every single event from the past, if she starts to remember it and dwells on the details and start to think back, it's like she's reliving it again. And anytime she has some sort of a download, like a vision from a parallel timeline, or the past or the future or wherever, she's not just receiving it, she's there, she lives it. It flows through her, takes her in. It's very hard, and it's not easy, and it's hard on this little girl, and that's why she actually likes to play a lot. She's very playful, she has a lot of dolls, and she's telling me that she's making now paper spaceship for these little tiny dolls, and she does them manually, artistically. That's how she calms herself, calms her mind. It's relaxing, and it's good for her mind in general, because it's so overwhelmed by memories and by past events that, as I said, she lives them. She relives them if she starts to think about them. And even though there are these differences, there are a lot of things that they have in common. And that is their love, their passion for the cause, for this cause and for whatever other cause they deem important, their passion, their dedication, their courage, their incessant drive to continue, and their compassion for the humans, for the humanity's fate, and for the humanity's evolutionary process. They both care deeply about the evolutionary process of humans and deeply care about the outcome for this planet. So thank you very much to both. I love you very much, both Swaruu 9 and Yazhi. Let's remember that Swaruu 9 continues living through Yazhi. She's not gone. She's here. And we love you through Yazhi, and we love Yazhi as a separate personality in a person as well. So thank you very much to both. Thank you very much to all of you for watching these videos and for your ongoing support. Until the next video.